in 1900, the thing to do in Washington, D.C. was to get out of town on weekends. In the summer especially, it was hot, humid. Back then, people cooked with coal. Power plants were burning coal. So the thing to do was go into the countryside. Some landowners in the Great Falls area hit upon the idea of creating an excursion trolley line to come out of the city and go to Great Falls. Of course, the falls are beautiful. They dubbed the falls the Niagara of the South. So they got a charter from the state to build the Great Falls and Old Dominion Railroad, but they didn't really get too far with it. So in 1902, they sold the line and the assets they had to a couple of investors from Washington. They were some very prominent citizens. One was Stephen Elkins, a senator from West Virginia. The other was John McLean, who owned the Washington Post. So they bought up the right-of-way, they bought Great Falls and the land all around the falls. They had to build a very long bridge over a difficult run. In 1906, they ran their first trolley and people started coming out of Washington. The electric railroads were the new technology. They were quiet, they were fast, they weren't as hot. By 1907, they were packed. Every weekend, they actually had 1.7 million passengers in 1907. Just like today, when new roads are built, development seems to follow them. That's what happened in Great Falls as well. Had this great trolley line that ran through mostly unbuilt areas, and developers started building homes and communities. And with every community came stores and post offices and that sort of thing. In 1911, John McLean and Stephen Elkins saw the success of the Great Falls and Old Dominion Railroad, and they wanted to try another railroad. So at the time, there was a railroad that ran from Alexandria out to the town of Bluemont in western Loudoun. But in 1911, Stephen Elkins passed away, died suddenly, and shortly thereafter, in 1916, John McLean died as well. So at a time when the railroad should be at its most successful, they were having a lot of problems. They limped along with passenger service until 1951, and at that point, the railroad lost the mail contract for the U.S. Postal Service, and by 1968, the railroad went out of business completely. The communities grew up around the railroad, and usually they grew up around the train stations. And the stations are where they are because the railroad knew they needed to have a station every 2 or 3 miles because people wouldn't go much further to get to a station. Farmers couldn't take their produce much further than that. So they planned stations, large stations like the Vienna station, every 3 miles or so. And then from there, people moved in and established businesses, and they built their homes, and they just kept growing. By the early 1970s, it was starting to become a trail, and is now the 45-mile-long Washington and Old Dominion Railroad Trail. The W&OD Trail goes right through the heart of Northern Virginia. It's accessible to millions of people. It's very popular. Every day, no matter what the weather, there's people out here. And we've calculated over 2 million people a year use the W&OD.